Welcome to Here Where You Belong, your go-to podcast for exploring belonging with your host and belonging expert, Dea Irby. We are thrilled to have you join us. Together, we'll dive into the depths of what it means for each of us to find our own place in the world, whether it's within our communities, our relationships, or within ourselves. Today's episode is meant to inspire, uplift, and remind you that no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. So grab a cozy spot and settle in. Welcome to Here Where You Belong.
Hello, awesome belongers. Welcome home to Here Where You Belong podcast. Today's guest went from the cotton mill villages of South Carolina to earning a doctorate in helping shape education for students around the world. I'm Dea, your host. Get ready to be inspired and blessed. Help me welcome our guest today, Donald Williams. Hey, Donald.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm so excited to share my story today.
Well, we are glad too. Let me tell you a bit more about our guest. Donald is an educator, researcher, author, storyteller, and a man whose life reflects the power of perseverance, faith, and generational transformation. Raised in a large working class family in the mill communities of South Carolina, Donald grew up understanding both hardship and the deep connection that comes from shared struggle and community. He became the first in his family to graduate from a major university. Not only that, eventually earning 3 degrees from Clemson University, including a doctorate. Overachiever. Over the course of his career, Donald has taught thousands of students and served for more than a decade with the Department of War education activity, supporting schools and families across the United States and overseas. Through his writing, music, and storytelling, Donald shares a powerful message that true belonging is not defined by status or background, but by recognizing the value and dignity within every person. His book, Born of Nothing, From White Trash and Lintheads to Purpose Across Generations, love the title, tells a deeply personal story of family, struggle, redemption, and rising above your beginnings without forgetting where you came from. Spectabulous. Donald, any additions, subtractions, or corrections?
I think you're spot on. This is
Okay,
perfect.
I got it. All right. Well, as you know, I have invited you on the show to share your story of belonging, and I know you have multiple stories. But what is God putting on your heart today to share with the listeners?
Okay, let me explain something. You mentioned the title first. I'm co-author with my friend. He was a college roommate, Jason Pike, who goes from his family. I'm going to say he talks about them being white trash, and I know that's a very derogatory term, but if in the book you see what this truly meant and where that term came from, his family literally came from a shack on the side of the mountains in Hendersonville, North Carolina, where I know you know where that is. And
Mm-hmm.
my family came from the Linthead part, so I want to speak of that. Now, Jason, he was diagnosed with a learning disability, and he rose to be a lieutenant colonel in the Army. He was told he would be nothing, and he ends up being that. Same thing with me. And so I don't know how many people here are aware of the cotton mill industry, but there was a time in South Carolina, I believe it was like 1 out of 6 people worked in a cotton mill in the population of South Carolina. And these people were coming off the farm. They were coming in from being tenant farmers, just dirt poor people. And then they were given these opportunities. My grandfathers, who I will say they're wonderful Christian men, who I know I will see again one day. I know that I will see them again. They were wonderful leaders, but they both were child laborers in the cotton mills. They started when they were about 9 years old, working in the mills. They were born, one was 1897, one was like 1901. And so you can imagine what life was like for them. So this cycle continues. It's like your family. That is the best you could do. They would have a little bit of education, or you would have self-education. They had readers that they would go through. And, their big hope. Now, my grandfather Williams, he was actually orphaned at the age of 12, and he ends up working in the mills, um, married and with 16 children. My other grandfather married and had 10 children. And so in my book, we talk about that. I had, I think, 42 aunts and uncles and 80 something first cousins. So in a mill village like that, when you work for a cotton mill, like my parents, they worked for the J.P. Stevens Industrial Mill, cotton mill in Rock Hill, South Carolina, and they made blue jean products. So you bring in raw cotton, and on the other end, you push out a blue jean material that made pants. Same thing today. Now there are, I think, pretty much zero cotton mills in the United States today. But in South Carolina, like even in Rock Hill, I think there were maybe 20 plus mills at one time in that time frame. But so what would happen, and I'm trying to tell this story here, you lived on the Mill Hill, what we call the Mill Hill or the Mill Village, and you lived in a house that was owned by the mill. You went to a store that was owned by the mill. You probably went to church, to a church that was donated to land by the mill, and maybe even had money associated with that. Schools, everything, Christmas parties, the whole deal. Your life centered around that. But I will say this: their life wasn't bad. They generally had a job, other than when economic downturns, depression, or whatever. But you would have food. You would have. This is bad to say this like this. You may have running water. You may have one light in your house. You may have you'd have an outhouse, and they had crews that would help with all that. So if something happened at your house, you would tell your supervisor, I need so and so fixed. And the houses belong to the mill. Everything belonged to them. Basically, you belong to them as well, because you were giving them,
Slavery.
yeah, you were giving them labor to live there. And the thing was you were in horrible fear that you could lose your job, because if you lost your job, you lost everything. You were
Mhm.
pushed out. You would have to go find somewhere else for your 16 children. And what are you going to do? The only way out was military. And I will say this: my father, I heard my father talk about this. He quit school at the end of the eighth grade. He had to switch school from junior high to high school, and he said, the first week of school in the ninth grade, I walked by the mill, like another mile or so to the high school. And he said, why am I doing that? Because I will end up here anyway. This is where I will be. And so he quit school, went to work in the mill at the age of 14. My mother did the same thing at the age of 16. And so you can imagine what this life was like in this community. And all of my aunts and uncles, it was the same thing. And the only way out would be military. You could join the military, risk your life, go serve wherever, but guess what? You would still end up back after the military service, you would still end up back in the mills. I remember this. My parents, the mills ran 24 hours a day, um, and my parents, one would work what we call second shift, 4 to 12 at night, 4 p.m. to 12. One would work third shift from 12 to 8 in the morning. They would, we would ride with them to the mill in the car and drop one off at 4 o'clock. They would wake us up, put us in the car. Like my mother, she worked third shift. She would wake us up, put us in the car. We'd drive and pick up my father so that we wouldn't be at home alone. And he would get in the car and take us back home where we would sleep. And then we were up the next morning. So you were living this life.
How
What
many were there? How many kids? How many siblings?
I have three older brothers, so there were four of us all together. Which at that point, I will say people have realized 16 children were not feasible anymore. And most of my, I think about the most any of my aunts or uncles had in their family were six. I don't remember any being. Most had around about four. Some had more than that. The term Linthead, I do want to explain that. People who worked in the cotton mills, and I went in as a child. I remember watching my daddy run a huge machine called a beamer, and it was taking cotton thread and weaving it into a rope. My mother worked in the weave room where she would take that rope and put it into a loom, and they would literally weave the cloth. But I remember going in and you would see these. It was noisy or dusty, but when the people came out, they would be covered in cotton lint. It would be all in their hair. It would be all over their bodies, all over their clothes. The women would wear scarves over their heads so that it wouldn't get in their hair so much. And they would come out. They would be covered, and so that's where the term Linthead came from. And it was actually more or less a derogatory term at the time because it was considered a low class, working in the mill, probably uneducated, that type of thing, and that's where they were. And then you have this cycle of poverty that's the only place you think you can go. So my grandparents worked there, their children worked there, and if the mills had not closed down, it would have been another generation as well. But they were working there, and that's what they're doing. But I'll say this, the life was great. I enjoyed it. I didn't know. People have often asked me, they said, did you realize? And I said, no, I thought we were rich. I thought we had everything. And I joke about this all the time, but it's absolutely the truth. My father, in the summertime when we weren't in school, we would go spend the summer with my grandparents during the day. And when we would get there, say 7:30, they would give us some breakfast, and then it would be, okay, your work schedule for the day is this. I'm an 8-year-old boy, and it's these are your 3 or 4 rows of beans, and these rows were long, long, long rows of beans, and this is where you will pull weeds and you will pick the beans. We would do that until lunchtime. We would have lunch, and then we would sit on the porch in the afternoon, shelling, snapping, doing whatever to the produce. Then my parents would come and pick us up, or we would run to where they were because it was all a mill village, and we would go to meet my
Was
father.
that their personal garden where they were growing their food?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they had like in their backyard, they had that. And there was on a mill hill, most of the people I would say were good, nice people, but you would have garden thieves who would come in at night and they would pick your garden for you. And so it wasn't, let's say it wasn't a perfect society, but for me, I loved it. I didn't mind. I mean, at the time, I remember as an 8-year-old boy sweating in the garden and picking those beans and being on my knees and going through there and just thinking, oh my goodness, am I ever going to get to the end of this row? And but then in the afternoon, sitting on the front porch in the shade with my grandmother, grandfather, and a lot of times an aunt or uncle would come by and would sit and help and share, and I would hear these wonderful stories of life, and it was great. Now, let's go to the church part. My parents, now my grandfathers were both Christian men, and my grandmothers as well, Christian women. My parents did not accept Christ until they were maybe in their 20s. It was maybe about the time that I was born, and they went to a tent revival, and they will tell you it was in York, South Carolina, and they got saved. And if we talked about this earlier about the Christian lingo, but that means they accepted Christ as their personal Lord and Savior, and they said, "This is the path we will take." And my parents never turned back. And I had the most wonderful role models of parents who took me to church every Wednesday, every Sunday, every Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night, everything, every vacation Bible school, every revival, everything. And my parents sang in a gospel quartet. So a lot of times they were traveling on a Saturday night to somewhere. And so we were getting that as well. We were witnessing a part of Americana that was just amazing. Now, I will say this, I love it. And I love church. I love being in church. It is fun to me. I enjoy it. I love every aspect of it. But I do want to say this, if it's okay. Um, I am not a Christian because of my parents. My parents took me to church and they influenced me, of course. But I'm a Christian because I studied on my own and I asked the question myself, is this what I believe in? And I studied the Word of God and I read the Bible and I said, this is what I believe. This is what is the truth for me. And I am a Christian. I've had a lot of conversations with atheists who would say, oh, you're just a Christian because your parents were. And I'll say, no, I'm not. If my parents had been atheists, I still would have accepted Jesus Christ because it's true. It's truth. And this is where I am. So the concept of school, church, mill life, I didn't realize it was difficult, but it's my story and I loved it. And I will never forget that, nor will I ever back off and not tell that story. I want people to know that story.
How did you manage to not quit like your dad did after eighth grade was, I mean, the world was different. And maybe did the mills close down by that time? How
The
did you
mills,
end up going to college?
okay, great question. The mills were starting to close down about the time I was getting out of school, but it was a goal of my parents. I think because they had quit, that they really wanted all four, I mean, myself and my brothers, to graduate from high school, and to them that would be a huge accomplishment.
Mhm.
Now, I will say this as an educator, I saw this while I was teaching, but I definitely saw it while I was a student, that principals and teachers would tell students, quit school, go ahead and quit. There's no need for you to be here. Go ahead and go to get you a job in the mill. I saw it, I heard it, I witnessed it, that they would tell students this. But my parents, for them, it was education is important. This is going to help you out. Don't, I will say this, my parents are brilliant. They were very well read, well studied, but their life circumstances only allowed so much. My grandfather's the same thing. Like I said, I think they said they made it through the sixth grade reader, is what they would say in those days, which was a lot of education. But my parents, for them, it was, if we can get you to graduate high school, that's awesome. The concept was though, you graduate high school and within a few months you would be married, you would have a job, and you would be off on your own. When you're 18, you graduate high school, you're married, you're starting your life, and that's what it was. And all three of my brothers did exactly that. They were married within a year, all of them, one within a couple of weeks of graduation, and that was the expectation. So when it came to me, I'm the youngest, and I had done well in school, and a counselor, they would interview every senior, and so she calls me through the office. Basically, she's asking, Donald, what mill do you want to work in? And I said, well, I was thinking about going to college. And it was, I remember the look on her face. It was like that look of, you're the child of Lintheads. Linthead children don't go to college. I mean, she didn't say that, and I'm putting words because this woman
But you
ends up
saw it
being,
in her face.
yeah, this woman ends up being a friend of mine later on. I worked with her because I went back and taught at my high school, and I worked with her, and she and I had this conversation, and she, the concept for me to go to college was like, what I might as well said, I want to build a spaceship and go to the moon.
Right.
That's not a possibility. And she was like, well, where do you want to go? I said, well, I want to go to Clemson. Well, Clemson's difficult to get into. And she was like, she starts pulling out transcripts in my records. She goes, well, you have the grades, but Donald, you've got to take the SAT. And I'm like, well, what is the SAT? I didn't know what it
They
was.
hadn't even given you the, and you're a senior?
Yeah, I didn't even know what it was. I had no clue. I didn't know because I had no context of what to know anything about college. It was
Right.
just
You
a
didn't know
concept
what
of,
you didn't know.
yeah, it was just like, oh, I'd like to go. Can I just, what do I do? And so I took the SAT, applied, I got accepted. But in that, I go to my mother and I go, Mama, and she's like, what would you like to do? And I said, well, I think I'd like to go to college. And it was like, what? What are you talking about? And at the time, it was my first teaching job. I was an agriculture teacher. I don't know if you're aware of that, but of that concept. But I told her, I said, well, I would like to. She said, what do you want to do? They didn't have the concept of what majors were or anything in college. I said, well, I think I'd like to be an agriculture teacher. And she goes, but you don't live on a farm. What? It didn't resonate with her. And and so anyway, I got it. I was accepted. They were able to help me, and by this time they had paid everything off they owed, and so they were able to pay for me to go to college. My mother would literally give me a check at the beginning of every semester. Now, I have a big story here because this is a pivotal point in my life. I go to college without any background or parental support or family support. There's no one in my family. And for me, going to Clemson 2 hours away I might as well have been going to China. It didn't make any sense. You just didn't do that. You may get to call home once a week, telephone rates, long distance. You had used to pay for that. So you're writing letters and things. I didn't have that parental support telling me, Donald, do this, do this. So I'm there pretty much by myself, but you surround yourself with good people. That's one of the keys to life. You surround yourself with people who will help you and help you succeed. I came home after my first year, and my first semester I did okay. I had basically a C average. I had a 2.0 GPA, 2.01. My second semester, I didn't do so well. And I remember getting the grades back then. You got them in the mail weeks later. Opened it up. I was taking 7 graded courses. I had 6 D's and 1 B. Now, I didn't fail anything, but 6 D's and 1 B. And it's like a 1.3 GPA. And my mother, in my mind, I thought, yeah, this college thing's not working out. And my mother starts fussing, I say screaming, but she was like, "You're wasting our money. You're wasting your time. Come on back, go to work. This is not going to work out." And my daddy goes, "Son, you did your best. You tried hard. You'll do better next time. You'll do better next semester." And I realize now I needed both of those messages. I needed the message that don't waste your time. Don't waste our time. Don't waste our money. And I needed that encouragement. And so I had that parental support, even though they didn't know anything about college. They knew enough to love me and give me support. And from there, I went a little bit better every semester. My last 3 at Clemson, I made the dean's list. My last semester, I made a 4.0. My master's and doctorate, all at Clemson. I never made less than an A on any course after that. And so I go back and talk about that pivotal moment where, it could be, I can just quit here, go to work, get a job. But that little bit of parental encouragement led me in the right direction. And I know it was God's path for me as well.
Absolutely. This is fabulous. And thank you for sharing. We need to take a break here, and we'll come back with my 3 favorite questions with Donald Williams. We'll be right back. Hey there. Isn't my guest amazing? So glad you joined us today. In this world that often feels disconnected, building community and fostering belonging are essential. That's why I created this podcast, to bring inspiring people to you, to encourage you to create that sense of belonging and community, no matter where you are. If you're being blessed by my guest, and we have some more, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You know who needs to hear this. Stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember, you belong. Now, back to our amazing guest. And we are back with the fabulous Donald Williams, educator extraordinaire, and all the other things he does. We hadn't even talked about his music. But I have 3 favorite questions I like to ask my guest. The first question, and I don't know how you're going to pick something, but what do you consider is your greatest accomplishment, Donald?
Okay, I would say first of all, my greatest accomplishment is not anything I've done, but it's the fact that Jesus Christ saved me. That's an accomplishment that I had nothing to do with, but I'm the recipient of it. For me, I guess the greatest accomplishment would be breaking that cycle of generational poverty, of getting out of that, but also showing other people, like both of my sons have a doctorate. And my one son just graduated last week from Liberty with a PhD. My son, who's the pastor, he has a doctorate in ministry. And once again, I didn't have anything to do with it. Maybe it was their mother that led them in that thing. But I love the concept that my family got beyond that meal cycle of that you're right here, and you cannot ever leave. I remember 3rd or 4th grade looking at a globe and being taught, this is a globe, this is the earth. And I remember the teacher going, this is where Germany is, this is Japan, this is Korea. And I remember thinking back then, I'll never see that. But yet I end up working on the other side of the earth. And for me, I realized maybe my largest accomplishment was the realization that the world is not York, South Carolina. The world is everybody. And the knowledge of knowing that also that everyone needs Christ, and how can you share that love of Christ with the world?
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, he's got the whole world in his hands.
Yeah.
And there's just so much. I wish that every person could have the opportunity to travel to another culture, to another country. It opens up your mind in so many ways. And you're right. People everywhere, all over the world need Jesus, but they need Jesus next door and your neighbors and your
Absolutely, yes.
down the street
You
too.
don't have to be a missionary to another country. You can be a missionary to your next door neighbor.
Well, you're either a missionary or you need one,
Yeah.
wherever you are.
Truth. Absolutely.
Um, Great. Well, that's you got a book published, and we in our family, it's my husband always mentions the I lay before you a blessing and a curse. That and let's pick up the blessing, and the blessing will be to multiple generations. The curse will be to a couple of generations.
Yeah.
So maybe that means you can turn it around. But it wasn't a curse, it was poverty. It was a mindset. And with believers, didn't understand your parents and your grandparents were believers.
Yeah, absolutely.
They what's possible. You don't want to be limited with what God can do. You said what's happened is God has done it. Second question, what makes you feel like you belong?
Okay, I struggled with this for a long time, a lot of time, because when I went to college, I went in homemade clothes, and I didn't have a suitcase, and I went with a duffel bag that my mother had sewn together from blue jean material from the mill, and my couple of pair of pants and shirts were stuck in a duffel bag. And I go to college, and you don't see people like me at college. You see people with designer suitcases and designer clothes, coming in, and so a lot of my life, and I will always say, Satan's really strong about going, you're not good enough, you're a nobody, that kind of thing, and you
Mhm.
have to throw that off. You have to get rid of that concept and realize that God made you, God loves you, God made you unique and special, and you need to find your purpose that God has for your life. And don't ever apologize for who you are or where God has you placed, because that's who you are. I will also say this, though. I have been in meetings where people have made fun of my Southern accent. If you haven't noticed, I have one. And they've even said, you're from the South, this kind of thing. They believe that a Hollywood stereotype that we're ignorant and backwards, this kind of thing. And I've even had people say, why don't you try to change that Southern accent? It's like, no, absolutely not. If you want to, you can start speaking like me, because this is who I am. This is how I was raised. And I will never apologize for where I came from or who I am. And for my culture, I will never, because I believe in my culture. I believe in the church culture. I believe in the family culture, and I would not trade my life or their life on any given day. I'm very proud of that.
Well, the very fact that you didn't know you weren't happy or you didn't know you were poor. I mean,
No,
this is how it was. You were rich. You had love. You had supportive parents. You had siblings. You did things together. You had grandparents that were right there that loved on you, that taught you discipline and chores and
no.
work ethic. And there are people that have way more money than any person can spend. And, the parents are never there for the kids because they're out making the money, whatever.
I saw this in teaching a lot of times, because as a teacher, I tried to lift up every student and make every student their best self. All the years I taught, but I would see that concept of a student who had been given everything. You just looked at that child and you would know they're not going to make it. And then you would see another child who came from poverty, maybe, who knew the struggles of life, and they were working harder. Um, that concept of us learning by our mistakes and learning from our hardships, we've got to take that into our being and know that everything, when we accept Christ, he's not saying you're going to have everything and you're going to be rich and all this. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. It's like, give your life to me. And that's what I've done. And so I don't expect anything in this life. Now, God has blessed me immensely, but maybe I don't know what I don't know. But that's the
Maybe
thing.
you think you're blessed, but you're not, according
But
to the
I know,
world.
but I know I am.
You
I, I,
are.
I had for I don't know, a year or two in my life, or more, or maybe 4 years total in my life, I've lived in a mobile home. I lived in a single wide. And I had a friend ask me not too long ago, he said, when you were living in that single wide, did you know that the way people looked at you and the stigma that you had? And I'm like, maybe, but I didn't care because I knew that I had a God who loved me. What more did I need? What more did I need? I had everything in the world. I had the riches of God. So no, I didn't worry about it.
Right. How did you, or did you just not, how did you assimilate, or how did you find your tribe, or how did you belong in college when
Well,
you were carrying your blue jean, which would probably be a designer blue jean bag now, people would pay $2,000 for, but
I would just say this. Now, I don't want anybody to think that I lived a perfect life or anything like that, but I was able, and I will say this is through God's guidance. Um, one day I'm in my room in my dorm. I didn't have very many friends, and a young man knocked on my door, and he goes, "Hey, I see you're in agriculture," because we had to put our name in our major. He goes, "I want to invite you over to this group. Would you like to come? We'll come pick you up and take you to this meeting." And I'll say it was a fraternity, but it was a good fraternity. Let's put it that way. And there were a lot of men there who uh, were born again Christians who I was surrounded by them. A lot of them end up being preachers and missionaries, this kind of thing. And they were the ones who taught me how to study, how to do college. They would make us sit down for a couple of hours every night, and we would have quiet hours, and you had tutors, and they would be like, "This is how you do this," and so you built that network. And so it was just a random knock on my door of a man that I know was led by God that knocked on my door and said, "Hey, you want to come to this?" And I was at that point, I was there alone, and I went, and and I will say this: some of these guys were wealthy, and some of them were not. I mean, but I'm certain I was the lowest, uh, and but I was accepted with open arms, and they never questioned that. I, I have a little funny story on that. My roommate told me his father owned a sawmill, and in my mind, I thought, and he said, "I want to take you to see the sawmill." So I'll go to see him. He lived in Newberry, South Carolina. And I'm thinking he's going to drive me down some old mud dirt road, and we're going to come down in this field, and there's going to be this old sawmill because I had actually worked in an old field sawmill like that before, scariest thing in the world. But we pull up to a factory, and his father owned like one of the largest lumber mills in the Southeast. And he was my roommate, and I had no idea that he was wealthy. I had no idea because he never treated me like I was anything other than equal to him. And so I
that's
love
awesome.
him for that. And like I said, said that God's got me in his hand, or he's got the whole world in his hand. God held me in his hand. And he goes, "This boy needs special help. I'm going to put him with some good people."
God was looking after you for sure.
Absolutely.
My last question, what is your favorite quote? And you do you have one, or do you want me to tell you
Tell me
what
what I wrote you because,
your starting point does
yeah,
not determine your finishing point?
point.
What an excellent, appropriate quote for you.
Yeah, because, and I hate to share this, but I think that was kind of maybe my quote because that's written in the book. And I'm sure it's probably attributed to someone else because I
Okay,
actually
you can
looked it up.
claim
I
it.
said, "Who said this?" And he goes, "It's kind of who knows who said it, as many people have said it." But it is that. It's that concept of don't let Don't let your surroundings and your beginnings dictate where you end. Don't let that happen. Now, there is another part to this because my son, the pastor, he heard me talking about this the other day, and he says, Daddy, you need to think about your answer. And he said, you need to say this: Donald Williams will not go quietly into the night. You will never hear of Donald Williams going to Florida to retire. Donald Williams will work hard until the day he dies. And that's absolutely the truth. And I think that goes back to that quote.
Sure.
I'm not going to, I've been I'll say a workaholic all my life, and I'm not going to sit on a beach and do nothing. I will always be teaching, talking, writing, singing, playing, whatever it takes. My grandson Noah jokes about this. He says, Paw, which he calls me, and he goes, if you were to ever end up in a wheelchair, God would just go ahead and kill you because he knows you can't sit still. And, and that is
He knows you
absolutely the
well.
truth.
And you're setting a great example of living your life to the end.
Oh,
When
absolutely.
God has all these works that he prepared for
Yep.
you to do, and he wants you to do them. And until you get them all done, you're still here.
When God takes me home, I'm just going to say, God, I didn't have enough time. I tried.
That's awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure speaking with you today. It is time to close, but before we do you have any parting words for our listeners?
You can visit, if you want to know more about me and more about my story, iamdonaldwilliams.com. So www.iamdonaldwilliams.com. I actually have a few of my songs I've written, probably 60 or 80 songs, and not AI songs. I'm talking about really writing the lyrics over the years of my life. And that some of them are on there, and I invite people to see them. I'm trying to get more in there, but I tell people writing songs for me is it's personal. It's not. I don't care if anybody hears them. It's for me. It is for maybe me and my family, or a love letter to me and my family, or to whatever, or to God. And but I do have some of that on there. But you can see who I am. But also, if you have any questions for me, iamdonaldwilliams.com. Go there. You can contact me, and I'd love to have an interaction with anyone.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that because I know that there will be people that want to follow up and find more. And is your book available on Amazon?
It is absolutely available on
Okay.
Amazon right now. It's free in Kindle. Uh, So it's
Grab
a
it.
free
Grab it.
download in Kindle, and the audio version will be coming out soon. I want to say this: I wrote this with someone else, and I disagreed on some of the language they use. I think I may have mentioned this to you there,
Well, white trash is going to talk a certain way to be authentic.
and that's what they said. They argued the other author. He goes, "We've got to be authentic with this. This is
Exactly.
how,"
If that's what you hear, that's what you hear.
and he said, "This
Uh,
is how my family spoke." And I
yep.
go,
Okay. So there's that. Well, to my amazing guest, you are spectabulous.
"Well, thank you."
Donald, thank you.
Oh,
And
thank
to
you.
our listeners, belongers, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember you belong. This is Dea Irby with Here You Belong podcast, signing off. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Hear Where You Belong. We hope today's episode has inspired you to embrace the beauty of belonging in your own life. Remember, no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. Join us again next time for more insightful conversations and heartwarming stories. Until then, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember that you belong.